Good evening and welcome to our annual Candidates Forum. Briefly, just a program change. The representatives for U.S. Congress will not be speaking this evening. But I would like to take the time right now to welcome everyone to our Candidates Forum. We're pleased to see everyone who's here in this nice turnout and would like to thank everyone in advance for lending us their time and expertise to provide information about their candidacy and plans for Norwood citizens. In particular, I would like to thank our Voter Service Committee, Lillian Callahan, Tony Esco, Carol Boys and Ellie Brown, Peggy Kenny, Sue Quinn, and in particular, Sarah Cullen and Marianne Kenny for their advance work to make this evening run smoothly for everyone here. My name is Courtney Rogers. I am the Vice President of the League of Women Voters Norwood, and I'm happy to make welcoming and introductory remarks this evening. Briefly, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization founded in 1920, the year the 19th Amendment was ratified and women won their battle for the right to vote. The mission of the League of Women Voters is twofold. One is voter service, to promote informed, active citizen participation in government, and two, to inform and educate, which would influence public policy through education and advocacy, and to take positions on substantive issues after careful study, which may or may not be of legislative concern. The League specifically does not endorse candidates for election, but we are here to provide information about those candidates to help serve that piece of our mission regarding an educated and informed voting public. The Norwood chapter of the League achieves this mission in different ways. We sponsor several public forums each year on chosen topics of interest. The forums provide residents with information and opportunities to meet with various officials in accessible locations to make their concerns and questions known. We also sponsor voter registration drives, and of course our Candidates Night, which for many years has been the centerpiece of our educational platform. You can find detailed information about all the races this election season on the November ballot at www.vote411.org, which is managed by the League of Women Voters Massachusetts, and it includes information on the presidential race, U.S. Congress, Massachusetts state representatives, and the 4 statewide ballot questions. You can find information about the Norwood chapter of the League by following us on Facebook and Twitter at League of Women Voters Norwood, Mass, and at our website at www.leagueofwomenvotersnorwoodmass.org. If anyone here is interested in joining the League of Women Voters, please see any member of the Norwood League. We all have lovely vote buttons on. They're easy to find. Or contact Tony Esco, our membership chair, directly. We are here for you because voting matters. At this time, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening. Karen Price is president of the League of Women Voters of Needham and former vice president of the State League of Women Voters. She has served as member and chair of the Needham School Committee and has been a Needham Town Meeting member for 18 years. She is a League trained moderator, and she will explain the format for the evening and introduce the candidates prior to speaking. So without further ado, please welcome Karen Price.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Voter service is the League's highest priority, and members spend most of the election season registering voters, but we also know that it's very important for voters to be informed about the candidates. As you can see from the program, not every race is contested, but all candidates are invited, even if they don't have opposition. The League feels that the voters want to hear from their elected officials and to know what they accomplished and what they want to do in the future. Unfortunately, the candidates for County Commissioner, Sheriff, Governor's Council were not able to be here, and only Congressman Lynch was due to an error, not the fault of his opponent, was not able. Stephen Lynch was here and his opponent was not. Each candidate, opposed or not, will have 3 minutes to open and 2 minutes to close, or however it's going to work for the unopposed. We'll see. There will be questions for each candidate, and each answer will have 1 minute. The candidates will speak in alphabetical order. So we're going to spend the next bit of time with our candidates for the 12th Norfolk District of the State Legislature. John Rogers is the incumbent, Democrat, and Tim Hempton, Republican. We're going to start with opening remarks from Mr. Hempton, which you can make from the podium and then take a seat.
When does my timer start now? Good evening and thank you for being here tonight. I want to thank the League of Women Voters, Courtney and Karen, for organizing this and inviting me here tonight. I'd like to thank Representative John Rogers for also coming here to participate in this debate. My name is Tim Hempton. I've been living in Massachusetts since 1987. I'm a practicing periodontist. I own and manage a small business in Dedham with 3 employees for over 20 years, and I have served as a dental educator at 2 local universities here in Boston. I believe that our state should not be governed by career politicians, but by citizens who are willing to stand up with common sense principles and for a specific amount of time. That is term limits. Looking at our state government, what I find is that we have a monopoly in Massachusetts. Monopolies can restrict ideas and restrict views. The private sector enterprises, such as the biotech industry and the high-tech industry, are very successful because they are open to new ideas and respect different views. Unfortunately, our state legislature too often rejects new views and follows a party line. Our state government was meant to be spirited, innovative, and resourceful, and to work for the betterment of the residents of this state. Citizens with experiences in other fields, such as myself, can catalyze beneficial changes, reversing governmental stagnation. Part of this approach to innovation must include investing in education, as students are our future. Budget assumptions made in 1993 need to be addressed. Updating Chapter 70 funding to adequately cover the cost of quality education will be one of my first priorities if I am elected to the legislature. With years of experience in business, healthcare, and education, I come here tonight to say that I bring a new perspective. Massachusetts has been a catalyst for change throughout its history. We've never been afraid to take a chance or to travel an unexplored path to find new ideas, to change the way things are done in the interest of finding a better way for all. I'm asking you to take a chance on me. I would be honored to represent all of you in the Massachusetts State Legislature, and I respectfully ask for your vote on November 8th, or if you're early voting sooner. Thank you very much.
And now, opening statement from Mr. Rogers. I should say Representative Rogers.
Call me anything, I've been called a lot worse. So. Well, good evening, I'm John Rogers, and I have the honor of representing you in the legislature. And knowing that I work for hardworking families, I've been working hard for all of you this past term, and I have a report for you. This past term, I fought and secured a record $44 million in local aid to the citizens of Norwood and Walpole, some $27 million alone for our school children. I led the fight to fully fund the circuit breaker program, which I created a few years back, which will bring $277 million in relief to our public schools. And as the ranking member of the House Senate Committee on Education, I was the only member of the legislature this year to file a bill to change the way the state funds local school districts and to raise that level from $4.6 billion to $5 billion. I was able to make Norwood the only town in the state to get core sample testing funding for the dredging of the Ellis Pond Dam, of the Ellis Pond. I'm the sole author of the law that created the MSBA and the model school program, which resulted in Norwood High School being the model school for the rest of the state. And it continues to save Norwood taxpayers more than $40 million. I wrote the law that cut your income taxes this year by $130 million. And tonight, I'd like to join with Senator Rush and make the announcement that we secured $56 million to build a new off-ramp off of I-95, which will, for the first time in Norwood's history, decongest traffic from the Neponset Street neighborhoods, the Dean Street neighborhoods, and University Ave neighborhoods. And that groundbreaking will begin in the spring. You know, I fought some battles that would have harmed our neighborhoods. I fought Spectra, the Spectra pipeline. I continue to fight 40B, which is the terrible law that ruins the quality of life of our citizens. I continue to fight against opiate addiction by founding the drug courts, outlawing fentanyl, prescription drug monitoring, and getting addicts the recovery help they need and get the pushes behind bars. I secured $723,000 in job training grants this year, and although the state's unemployment rate is 4.7, Norwood is leading the Commonwealth with an unemployment rate of 3.4%. That's a 35% drop in joblessness, and Norwood is leading the way. So I'm working hard for you, and I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to remind people if they want to write a question on a card and then raise their hand, somebody will come and collect it and give it to the question sorters who will determine if it's been asked already or should be asked again. Yes. We're going to start with a question, which will, excuse me, get a little bit organized. We'll start with Representative Rogers, and then we'll reverse who starts each time. The State Foundation Budget Review Commission has found that state aid to education law has not been updated to show increases in health insurance costs and teacher salaries. The special education law was passed fully funded, but the cost of compliance with the law has not been fully funded. And this lack of funds from the state is why Norwood and other towns and cities are finding it hard to balance school budgets without cutting teachers and parents' fees. Teachers and parents' fees are out of sight. Can you please explain why this has happened and what you think the legislature should do in the coming year to correct this problem? You have 1 minute each.
Did my mother submit this question? I am a co-creator of the Foundation Budget Review Commission, knowing that some of the assumptions in the Chapter 70 formula have been flawed. So, as I said in my opening remarks, I'm the first and only legislator this term to file the bill, House Bill 4219, to correct that, the assumptions on health care and the assumptions on special education. I also created the Special Education Circuit Breaker, which is going to fund local cities and towns, school districts, to a tune of $277 million, and that is fully funded. So the other bill I'm going to try to work on in the next term, if re-elected, is House Bill 472, which would add transportation costs to the SPED circuit breaker and give actually more money to our local school districts struggling to educate those of our children with special needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hampton?
Yes. I agree with Representative Rogers that these issues really need to be looked at. I just am concerned as to, after all these years, why it's taken so long to file that bill. We understand that Chapter 70, which was written in 1993, was quite some time ago. And as you all know, the assumptions that this foundation was built on really did not take into account what's happened since that time. Medical education has greatly improved over the years. Many pregnancies which would be troubled and might result in births that would not happen now have occurred. These babies, however, when they come into the school system, now have increased needs for special education, and they are here and they're more than ever before. And in addition, we also need to have good funding for the faculty of these schools. I believe it's time that we do provide more funding and that we look for ways to cut wasted money in the budget up to $1 billion per year, as reported by the auditor's report and also suggested by Sean Dooley in a recent newspaper article. The money needs to be managed better so that we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Hampton, we'll start with you on the next question. There has been much in the news about the opioid epidemic escalating in this state and in the country. Can you tell us about this problem and what efforts we can make to stop the growing number of deaths due to overdosing, et cetera?
As people in the room are aware, the death toll in this state is astounding. It's almost like 4 people a day. This is a huge problem in the Commonwealth and throughout the United States. Governor Baker proposed legislation, and with the help of Robert DeLeo and the other members, including Representative Rogers, voted to make sure that legislation went through to create a situation where physicians and dentists and healthcare providers put fewer prescription opioids out there. And this is a good step, but it's not enough. One of the reasons the opioids are a concern is because they're a gateway to heroin. We need to reduce the amount of heroin that's available by helping police officers and the public safety reduce it. And we need to have and continue to have good education in the schools, elementary schools, to instruct children on the dangers of this problem. We need to show our young people this is a dangerous problem and very threatening. Thank you.
Representative Rogers?
In Norfolk County, there's 150 overdoses per year, according to District Attorney Morris, who told me that last week. Bill Keating and I saw this problem more than 15 years ago when we chaired the Judiciary Committee. And that's why Bill Keating and I created the drug courts in Massachusetts, and Quincy's the first one. Now there's 24 drug courts across the Commonwealth. I voted for the law to outlaw fentanyl. I voted and was a co-sponsor of the online prescription pharmacy monitoring law. And I created the first program in the state, in Dedham, Massachusetts, which provides for a Norfolk County juvenile substance abuse prevention program and captures those young offenders in that area that have a problem with drugs and getting them on back in the straight and narrow, just like the drug courts. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we need to continue to focus on it, but I'm proud of my track record that goes back 15 years when no one else was listening about opioid addiction.
Okay, thank you. The next question will start with Representative Rogers. Both the House and Senate have rejected a proposed constitutional amendment to establish a permanent 7-member redistricting commission. As the law now stands, the legislature itself draws the districts. Can you comment on why both houses object to this bill? Representative Rogers.
Well, I think the founding fathers and the framers of our Constitution wanted, under the one person, one vote doctrine, people that are accountable to the people to draw the lines. And to make sure each House district, and there's 6.7 million people in Massachusetts, you divide that up by 160 House members, and it comes out to roughly somewhere north of 40,000. So for the 12th Norfolk district, we represent almost 30,000 people in Norwood and half of Walpole, which makes up the 12th Norfolk district. So when something goes wrong, or if some civil rights activist needs to have a claim for instance, whitening down districts, then there should be an elected official, a senator or a member of the House, that should be held accountable, and not some bureaucratic commission.
Thank you. Mr. Hampton.
Thank you. I think the question could be redescribed as, what is gerrymandering? And that's exactly what this is. In Massachusetts, the Democratic Party controls the legislature. And there's no doubt that I can clearly walk into this room and say I'm a minority. Republicans are a minority in this state. And when the majority controls the legislature and they control this issue, they're going to be dividing up the districts that can benefit them. I believe that another way needs to be looked at, and that gerrymandering needs to stop in this state so that we can have a more fair approach to getting a more balanced state to the legislature. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hampton, we'll start with you on this one. The 2016 statewide ballot question committees have so far collected $45 million in total, with question 2, the charter school question, collecting $20 million for and $13 million against, mostly from PACs and unions. Currently, We limit contributions to candidates, but there are no limits to campaign contributions to ballot question committees. Would you favor limits on contributions to ballot question campaign committees in the future?
I don't believe I would. I think one of the advantages of this type of funding is it allows to put information out. Now, there's two sides to this story on the charter schools. And I read Representative Rogers' comments in the newspaper that personally he's for it, but publicly he's against it. It means that he feels, like many people do, that this is an issue that needs to be explored. And one of the advantages of putting this money out is it allows people to get information. I understand there's a negative to that also, that funding these types of PACs can also create people leaning to one direction or the other. But I think in the end, if money is put in to do this, I think people do see this information. For the record, I would say that I would stay with the way it is.
Thank you. Representative Rogers.
I'm in all in favor of limiting contributions, accountability, transparency, and getting the dirty money out of politics. So I differ with Tim on that one. I just want to correct something that Tim said. I am both publicly opposed to question 2 and privately opposed to question 2. And this is a dividing point between Tim and me. I spent the last term securing $410,000 for the Norwood and Walpole school children. And do you know how much money goes to Foxborough? 100% of that. Plus, the town of Norwood has to cut another check for $208,000. So Tim's happy with the money going to Foxborough. I want it to stay here in Norwood and in Walpole for our school children.
As long as we're on this topic, we've started talking about question 2. Mr. Hampton, would you like to continue?
Yes, I would.
For 1 minute.
I get 1 minute?
Yeah.
Okay. I understand that there are concerns that there's a certain amount of money in the budget that can go to education. I certainly want as much money as possibly can come to Norwood. But I think when you look at question 2, and I agree with the governor on this, it's a statewide concern. One could say that when you live in Norwood, you basically have a great school district. People don't move here to send their kids to charter schools. This is really a problem that has to do with this urban areas where there's a lot of poverty. And one can say, should you be penalized living in a zip code where basically the school system is not that great, where you have urban areas with poor public schools, and this gives the parents a choice to have their children have a better opportunity than what they have in the present time. So it's a statewide issue, and that's the way I see it.
Representative Rogers, would you like another minute on question 4?
Sure, thank you. Question 2?
2, sorry.
Yeah, I just differ with Tim on this. He said that it's good for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We're not running statewide. We're not running to represent Massachusetts. We're running, very simply, to represent the people of Norwood and Walpole. I don't work for the government. I don't work for the governor, although I like him and I like working with him. I do not work for Governor Baker. I don't work for the state of Massachusetts. I work for the people, and that's why I love my job, because it gives me the opportunity every day to help out the 40,000 people living here in this town, in our bordering town, and the town of Walpole. So, as simple as it sounds, we're running to represent the people of the 12th Norfolk, not the state of Massachusetts.
Okay, thank you. This one, we'll start with Representative Rogers. This has come up already. The 40B housing law has been causing great difficulties for some towns and needs to be reformed. Having affordable housing in each town is a good idea, but the law is taking advantage of, but is the law being taken advantage of by builders and others, especially in Norwood? Do you think it should be amended, and if so, how and why? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a terrible law, and it's being taken advantage by greedy developers who don't live in Norwood or Walpole, who want to make a quick buck and change the character of town forever, and ruin the school systems we try so hard to protect. Yes, I filed several bills. I filed a bill, first one in state history, to repeal Chapter 40B and replace it with the Affordable Housing Trust and the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, which is a far more sensible way to provide affordable housing, as we do need in Massachusetts, not the cudgel of 40B. I also filed a bill to change the definition of affordable housing to include Section 8s, MRVPs, which are also a form of affordable housing that we provide currently here in Norwood. It should be included to our 10%. And lastly, I filed a bill to protect the foul meadow. 1/3 of foul meadow is in Norwood, and 1/3 of this town is the foul meadow. And this would protect Norwood from greedy developers, and it would get Norwood well over the 1.4%, while recognizing what we're already doing in our current housing stock to provide needed affordable housing.
Thank you. Mr. Hempton, 40B.
Yes, I would agree with Representative Rogers in his statement that this is a horrible law and it's very destructive. When you look at the law, it's supposed to allow communities to do better when in fact they actually result in builders and construction people making a lot of money and not really helping when you have huge high-density housing in the town. So I believe that this law does need to be changed, and I agree that we need to look at how the law provides affordable housing and not necessarily describe it as how new construction provides affordable housing. I did recognize that Representative Rogers has filed these bills. I would just like to see them make some traction. That's my answer.
Okay, we have another question related to 40B, which is a little bit different, and we'll start with Mr. Hempton. Norwood is currently engaged in a 40B battle using the 1.5% land initiative. This is due to the fact that a grassroots initiative led by citizens forced the town to taking this course. What, if any, was your involvement with these citizen groups?
Well, as you all know, I'm not a resident of Norwood. I live in Walpole, but I have met with citizens groups from South Norwood. Folks like Kevin Pentowski and Tom Grundlick have invited me to multiple meetings that they held in the Morse House. This is a very complex issue. Effectively, I understand there's 2 cases pending on 2 40B housing projects that are there, and hopefully that this will be settled in a way that favors Norwood. But even though I'm not a resident here, I'm very concerned about what happens in this town, and so that has been my involvement. I did note that Representative Rogers was invited to these meetings and he did not attend.
Representative Rogers.
Well, I do live in this town. I was born in this town. I was raised by 2 good parents, Ann and Walter, in this town, and I'm raising 3 daughters in this town, unlike Tim. I have seen the devastation of 40B, and I have been filing bills on 40B and changing 40B gradually, because all the votes were the urban legislators, not the suburban legislators, on this issue, and have made changes. Earlier last year, Senator Rush and I were able to get a bill through both the House and the Senate, which would prohibit the Campanelli 40B proposal from superseding Chapter 40 economic development TIF agreements that the town had already signed with, in good faith, with the Campanelli developers. We're making progress on 40B. I have a lot of patience, but I have little disregard for this horrible law when there's so many better ways to provide affordable housing for our citizens.
Okay. Representative Rogers, we'll start with you. You knew this was probably going to come up. How do you feel about the Community Preservation Act?
Well, I wrote the Community Preservation Act. I'm proud that it was signed into law by my friend, God rest his soul, Governor Paul Cellucci. It was signed on September 14th, 2000. We were at the Robert Treat Payne Estate. And we did it. It was sitting in committee for years before I became chair. So I rewrote it with Norwood Senator at the time, Marion Walsh. And we put it on Governor Cellucci's desk. And now so many communities have partnered with the state to gain valuable assets as to affordable housing. It's a better way to do it. Historic assets and an environmental concern, open space. So I'm glad that my hometown, after 16 years, is now considering it as a tool to stave off 40B developers, preserve its historic assets, and to provide affordable housing in its own way, and to preserve open space. So thank you.
Mr. Hampton?
Regarding the Community Preservation Act, there's quite a few good things that are associated with it, as Representative Rogers has pointed out. Some view it as a tax, though, and it can have varying percentage points in which this may be increased. I would leave it to the citizens of Norwood to determine what's in their best interest for their community. So my opinion is I'm glad this legislation is available for them to look at, and I'm sure they will make the correct decision for their community when the time comes on November 8th.
Okay. Mr. Hampton, we'll start with you. Legislation banning plastic bags seems to be going nowhere in the legislature. Can you talk about why legislation so important to stopping the littering of our beaches and oceans is having such a difficult time passing? Mr. Hampton.
Well, it could be that the legislature is a little sluggish on environmental concerns. There's no doubt that when it comes to the environment, I believe that it's important to take these things into consideration. So I just believe it's probably just sluggishness on their part to get this moving.
Would you be in favor of such legislation?
Yes, I'm an environmentalist, which is interesting from most people consider Republicans aren't, but I am.
Representative Rogers?
Well, I respectfully disagree that the legislature is being sluggish. I think they're dragging their feet on purpose, and I think big money is hiring a lot of lobbyists to kill that bill, which I favor. Our environment is so important. That's why I voted for the Clean Energy Act earlier this year, which will provide new sources of renewable energies and clean energy, and up to 2,800 megawatts of clean energy, the least of which should be in offshore wind power and other forms of clean energy. So, we've been up there now fighting that fight, but I think the leadership is dragging their feet on purpose. I don't think they're making due considerations. I think they've told the lobbyists, quite shamefully, that the bill's going nowhere, and I support the bill.
Okay, thank you. Next question, start with Representative Rogers. We'll stay with the environment. There is legislation pending to place a 10-year moratorium on the process of fracking, which is the process used in the mining of natural gas. Can you tell us your reason for voting for this moratorium? And in the case of Mr. Hampton, you didn't have an opportunity to vote for it, so you can just talk about it.
I'll make believe I did.
But we're going to start with Representative Rogers.
Yeah, I'm the lead author with Senator Jim Timilty, and I saw Senator Timilty from Walpole in the back. The lead author of a bill that would prohibit Spectra Pipeline, which we've killed so far, from putting a fracked gas line through the heart of my constituents' backyards, which imperils not only their quality of life, but their lives as well, and would force them to pay for the capital costs. And we put legislation into effect in 1997 while we were filing this bill, and the Supreme Judicial Court came down, looked at our language in 1997 and said, hey, Spectra, you can't do this. So we won a minor defeat, but we're going to have to get some legislation through, a law through, that lets Spectra know that you can't force your way through our districts and force the ratepayers, our ratepayers, to pay for the costs of the capital costs.
Thank you. Mr. Hampton?
I don't believe that we should be pushed around by big companies like Spectra. Myself, I also agree. And that this pipeline, which is supposed to improve our infrastructure, one could look to see that we have pretty good infrastructure now in terms of natural gas. They're projecting what our needs will be in the future. I think rather what we should do is look at the needs of the future as to how we can look at more renewable type energies like solar and other types of things. I understand recently in the legislature there was an effort to look at solar energy and how this would be sent back to the electric companies, and this was somewhat reversed. Big business, corporate foundations that put money and sort of support pushing legislation one way or the other should not be a factor to legislators. I'm an independent person, I believe what's right should be voted on, and if I was elected, I would not let any funding from any lobbyist or corporate foundation push me in that direction. So I agree that our environment is key, and it's what we need to give on to our children and our children's children.
Thank you. Next question. The legislature recently rejected a bill to say that they would need a 2/3 majority to spend the rainy day fund. What do we use this fund for, and could it be used for education aid to cities and towns? Mr. Hampton.
Well, I think the rainy day fund is specifically what it's supposed to be for. A rainy day when revenues drop because the economy slows down, or there's just difficulty in collecting funds to fund the budget. A recent article by the Boston Globe described how the budget over the last 15 years has gone from high $20 billion to almost $39 billion. And that in order to keep balancing the budget, they, instead of making hard decisions on cost cutting, on things like Medicaid and other issues, and looking at waste, if you look at the auditors, Susan Bump's, the state auditor's report, up to $1 billion in waste. So we should be looking at that money rather than taking money away from the rainy fund when we may actually need it when revenues drop. That's my answer.
Thank you. Representative Rogers?
Yeah, no, the rainy day fund should not be protected by a 2/3 majority. It should be protected by a 3/4 majority, 3/4 majority. The easiest thing to do is to rate it. The most difficult thing to do is put money into it. I used to have to trade with the Senate all the time. They would fight for expanded budgets, and I would fight to put money in the rainy day account. Let me tell you, there's no present day constituency for the rainy day fund. When I was chair of Ways and Means, I built up the highest reserves in state history, $2.3 billion. And I don't think the money should go for education operating costs, but I created the Massachusetts School Building Authority and the Model School Program, and that's the appropriate vehicle for expenditures on one-time expenditures. And Norwood is the best model for that because it became the model school, and that continues to save our local taxpayers $40 million.
Okay, thank you. There's a specific, do you support question 4? That is the legalization, regulation, and taxation of marijuana. And in particular, do you think it will affect our state's opioid crisis? And we'll start with Representative Rogers. So first, do you support it, and second?
I'm a no vote on that. A strong no vote for that. We have it will exacerbate our opioid addiction and our crisis that we're trying to get our hands around and to confront. I hosted a forum at the State House. It was attended by more than 80 senators and reps. And our own police chief in Walpole, John Carmichael, was the expert. We brought in the Colorado experts, and they told us the absolute abject devastation that is occurring in that state. They talked about the highly toxic and highly addictive products and THC, and gummy bears and cookies and all sorts of products that children out there are getting access to. I want to go the other way. I don't want our youth addicted to drugs, and that's why I created the Norfolk County Juvenile Substance Abuse Prevention Program. And it's been up and running for 2 years now, and it's a success by all measures. So no on that dangerous, dangerous question.
Mr. Hampton, question 4.
A very vigorous no. This is a huge mistake. Representative Rogers mentioned Chief Carmichael. I've worked with him in Walpole. We had a meeting on the opioid epidemic. The governor came. We also had a meeting on the marijuana issue. Marijuana is a gateway drug. In addition, it's already legal for people to use marijuana for medical purposes. There's no reason to bring it in for recreational purposes. You have to understand that during the growth and development of children through adolescence and their teenage years, their brain is still developing, and there's evidence that marijuana has an impact on it. Let alone the fact that when people are driving under the influence of this drug, a state trooper can get killed. I absolutely urge everyone to vote no against recreational marijuana. It's a huge mistake. And as, like I said, even the food and the candies that these kids might get their hands on, Fact is, I just want to finish, my wife, actually, who works in an emergency room, had a patient come in who was in her late 70s, who she thought she was having a stroke. She had been given cookies laced with marijuana, and they had a hard time figuring out what to do until finally the daughter said, well, we thought it was funny. We gave her these marijuana-laced cookies. This is a disaster. Please vote no.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Hempton. Do you think that the bill that passed the legislature that establishes the Office of State Veterans Homes and Housing will solve the problem of homeless veterans in our state?
Well, one can always hope so. I mean, there's certainly the issue of I actually worked for the Veterans Administration for 3 years, and I have the greatest respect for those who have served our country. Any legislation that's passed to try to help the veterans, I commend the passage of this, and I certainly hope it will work. Clearly, we need to do our best, and I understand that this will do a lot. One of the other problems we face with veterans, however, is that many of them come back with substance abuse problems and have great difficulty readapting to society. You can't legislate away homelessness. What we need to do is make sure that state veterans organizations also work on the mental health issues for veterans to make sure that they can be guided to where they need to be. Thank you.
Representative Rogers?
I respectfully disagree with Tim. You can legislate away homeless. It's a matter of political will. It's a matter of getting it done. My dear friend, Marty Walsh, whose mother lived here in Norwood for years, the mayor of the city of Boston, 643 veterans this time last year were homeless. Now 0 of them are homeless. That happened because of political will. We can take Mayor Walsh's model and make that statewide. I just came from an old VFW. We're talking about this down there now. We were talking about ending veterans homeless statewide, and I didn't want to look them in the eye and say, don't look at us, because there's no legislative solution when it comes down to political will of the House, the Senate, and the governor working together. We'll get it done.
Thank you. Next question. Do you feel serving as a state rep creates a conflict of issue for getting involved in local town issues? Who are we starting with?
I believe it's your turn.
Okay.
Wait for Madam Moderator.
Representative Rogers, please.
No, I don't think there's any legal conflict to working on with the agencies. I was just going to Norwood Town meeting tomorrow night. I was before the planning board last week. I talk with the selectmen almost every day. Talk with a lot of elected officials and a lot of agencies in Walpole, the Board of Selectmen there, the Walpole School Committee, my Chief of Staff, Bill Buckley, is on the Walpole School Committee. He's in my office every day. So there's no conflict for state legislators working, and I think it's encouraged by state law that state legislators are, like myself, in constant communication with the several agencies and boards and elected officials who serve on those boards.
Mr. Hempton?
I don't believe there's a conflict of interest either. In town politics, it's nonpartisan. And I agree that everyone, whether they're an elected official or not, wants to work for the best interests of their town. For the record, in Walpole, I am a representative town meeting member, and I serve on the Capital Budget Committee. So I understand the importance of what happens in your town, and also it makes you able to work better with the people of the state. So I don't see there's a conflict of interest. For the record, it's a nonpartisan issue.
Thank you. There's another question here that I have to reword a little bit because it's addressing one of you in particular, so I'm going to try to generalize it. It's getting back to the charter school issue, I think. So do you believe that children in other towns outside of Norwood and Walpole don't deserve quality education? That's kind of the gist of it. It gets back to the statement statements that were made about charter schools, and one of you saying representing Norwood and Walpole, and the other more or less saying the whole state. So can you comment on that again, starting with Mr. Hampton?
Yes. I understand what Representative Rogers said, that when you're the state representative from the 12th Norfolk District, you serve the people of Norwood and precincts 1, 2, 6, and 7 in Walpole. But as an elected official to the General Court of the Commonwealth, you're also there to also serve the general interests of the Commonwealth. In my opinion, he obviously disagrees. And having said that, in the big picture, I do believe that there are children in urban areas that deserve better, they deserve a choice. And if they succeed in their education because they were given this choice, they may be successful enough to move to a great town like Norwood or to Walpole and raise a family and succeed. Education needs to be looked at in such a way that people can get ahead. That's my answer.
Representative Rogers?
Well, I'm proud to say that my first vote was for the Education Reform Act, and it's brought more than $80 billion to equalize the playing field all across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, so that a child's education is not directly proportional to the value of the property or the land beneath her feet. But I'm very clear about who I represent: the 4,004 school children in Walpole and the 3,480 school children here in Norwood. I don't represent the other 349 other cities and towns, and I'm not going to speak for them when it hurts my school children.
Okay, we have one more question, and then we'll go to closing statements. We'll start with Representative Rogers. This is getting back to the ballot questions. Now, we've already discussed question 4 and question 2, and actually, I guess it's question 5 in Norwood. Okay, so could you comment on questions 1 and 3? So protecting farm animals, which is 3, and expanding slots, which is number 1.
Sure, I'll start, I guess, with number
Rogers,
1, if that's okay.
Representative Rogers. Yep.
Yeah, no, I voted against the first Racino, so it makes sense that I'm against the second Racino, so I'm a no on that. I fear, quite frankly, the 30-mile cannibalization effect that occurs on our businesses in downtown Walpole and downtown Norwood, in retail and banking and restaurant and entertainment, like the beautiful Norwood Theater. And I don't think it adds to the quality of life and enhances life here in Massachusetts. On question 3, I am opposed to it. Although I'm the co-sponsor of the puppy doe law that increases penalties for animal abuse, and I'm a co-sponsor of a bill that would create an animal abuse registry. And although this year I voted for the law that creates a Good Samaritan law for people to basically save animals during extreme weather, I am against this because the most over-regulated American worker is the American farmer. And they're already going to change to cage-free next year for veal, and crate-free for veal and cage-free for hens. So I'm opposed to it because it seems like a solution in search of a problem.
Thank you. Mr. Hampton?
I'm against gambling in general. I think it's a waste of people's money. I understand that some people have a predilection to doing it. There's plenty of places that they can do this. I don't think it's a good thing for the Commonwealth to step down the continued road of expanding gambling facilities. Regarding animal farm containment, generally speaking, I'm against regulations, but in this particular instance, I basically believe that even if these are animals that will become part of our food source, abuse to any animal is a bad reflection on human nature. So that's my opinion on that.
Okay, great. I think we've collected all the questions, and we'll go on to closing remarks, which are 2 minutes, and you could speak from your seats. And why don't we just continue as we have been, and Mr. Hampton, you start and represent.
Well, I went first. Shouldn't he go first? I mean, whatever you say. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Basically, what I have here is a graph that demonstrates the money in the budget spent in the Commonwealth of the Massachusetts. And down here, these lines represent local aid. This is in billions, this is in millions. The top line, the green line, actually adds up local aid that's unrestricted local aid and also aid that goes to education in millions. They are effectively a straight line, while this budget here is in billions. I'm here to say tonight, what are we doing with this money? This money, much of which $1 billion has been identified as waste by the state auditor, belongs here in the cities and towns. It belongs in Norwood. We need to make effective changes in the legislature to stop the wasteful spending and to contain the costs. Our budget has ballooned. Some of the ballooning, a third of the budget, is now for Medicaid, which is a health care. I understand that people in need do deserve this, but this type of system needs to be managed better. The costs are very, very expensive. In summary, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for inviting me here tonight, and I'd like to thank Representative Rogers for sitting next to me and debating me. I really appreciate that. I want to end by saying I'm pro-business, pro-growth, and pro-education. Every decision I make, if I'm elected as your state representative, I will ask myself this question: is this the right decision for the people who live in Norwood? I will work to ensure that education is properly funded and that the citizens of this state are fairly taxed, and once those taxes are collected, that money is properly managed. I will ensure that veterans are taken care of. I am the son of a veteran. My father served in the Pacific, and my uncle, his brother, served in Europe. Tonight, I hope I've inspired you to take a chance on me and to believe that I can help to make a change for tomorrow. And as I mentioned earlier, I ask for your vote on November 8th, or if you're voting early. Thank you.
Thank you, and Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I want to give a special shout out to all the kids who may be at home watching this. And if my own 3 daughters are watching, Abby, Kate, and Lindsay, I'm coming home in about 10 minutes, so you better have your homework done. About 236 years ago, in this very county, not too far from this very spot, John Adams sat down and he set out and wrote the Massachusetts Constitution, the oldest constitution of its kind in the world. And in it, the very first words of the Constitution, there in the preamble, Mr. Adams sets out the purpose of government. And the words are still there, and it says, the end of the institution of government is to form the body politic and to protect it and to furnish those individuals who compose it, the citizens, with the power of enjoying their natural rights and the blessings of life. That's what this election's about. It's not about Tim or John. It's not about extending political careers or starting new ones. It's about something far more important. This election is about you. You have a right and an opportunity as a voter to pick the candidate who will best secure the blessings of life for you, your family, your children, and your community. And my record speaks for itself. I've been working a long time securing the blessings of liberty and life for our senior citizens, our veterans, our children, our disabled, our taxpayers, and our working families. That takes a lot of hard work to get that done, and I think my record shows that I have been working hard for you. So I humbly suggest that when you get in the secrecy of your ballot box, that a vote for John Rogers is a vote for you. And so therefore, I humbly ask you for your vote. And thank you. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Okay, that concludes our questions. I'd particularly like to thank the candidates. They were very good at sticking to the time and speaking succinctly and answering the questions. And also just for putting yourselves out there in our democracy. And thanks everybody for coming. Thanks to the League of Women Voters. Remember to vote early or on November 8th. And good evening.